Boa tarde a todos e a todas. Sejam muito bem-vindos, muito bem-vindas. Gente, esse painel ele vai ser em inglês, certo? Eu vou só fazer uma breve fala aqui em português, antes de passar as perguntas para os nossos convidados internacionais, só para explicar para todo mundo como é que vai funcionar, tá certo? A gente tem aqui embaixo, na barrinha, um canal em português ou inglês. Vocês vão ali em Interpretation, vocês podem escolher qual dos idiomas que vocês querem, tá certo? Tem tradução simultânea. Qualquer dúvida que vocês tiverem, podem perguntar aqui no chat, que a nossa equipe vai respondendo para vocês sobre como fazer isso, tá certo? Inclusive, para as perguntas depois, tudo vai permanecer da mesma forma que nos outros painéis. Vocês podem fazer pergunta diretamente falando, ou mandar aqui no Q&A aqui de baixo, e a gente vai levar as perguntas para eles, ou então vocês fazem as perguntas em português e elas vão ser traduzidas, tá certo? Como preferirem. Então, dito isso, eu já vou apresentar aqui os nossos convidados que já estão nos esperando. Então, vou mudar agora para o inglês, tá certo? So, thank you very much, Alexander and Idoia, for being here. It is amazing to have you here from Edinburgh and from Madrid. Well, everyone, thank you for being here today. This is our international panel. We're going to discuss how governments around the world have been adopting and using open innovation strategies and practices in order to enhance the provision of public services. So I have two very special guests here. I'm going to introduce them very soon. First of all, just two notes. The first one is that we had originally a third guest. She's a colleague of mine, Silvia Romanelli. She unfortunately will not be available here. She won't be able to talk with us. She had a minor health issue. Don't worry, it's not COVID-19. She just warned us. I would just like to make this brief note in order to just acknowledge the work that Silvia has been doing in the last months. Alexander knows her. She's the one that made all these kind of international cooperations possible. Silvia has been our diplomat here at IdeiaGov, and she's been doing a fantastic work with internationalization here. So, well, first of all, thank you very much, Alexander and Idoia. I'm going to introduce them, our guest here right now. Alexander is a fellow of ours. We have been working with Alexander for some months now. He works with emerging opportunities and partnerships as the Digital Directorate at the Scottish Government. And well, Alexander, thank you very much for being here. And,
well, thank you.
Thank you very much for getting us involved with the CivTech Alliance. Alexander is here because he created and led and is still a champion at the CivTech program in Scotland, which was an inspiration for IdeiaGov and still inspires us. And we actually have revisited our innovation flow after getting to know how the CivTech program operates. And I would just like to state that thank you very much for involving us in this. And right now, IdeiaGov is a member of the CivTech Alliance, which, you know, is an organization that is actually an alliance of similar programs, which comprises organizations from 16 different countries, right? And I believe you're going to talk a little bit more about that later.
Yeah.
And I would also like to thank a lot Idoia Ortiz de Atieno for being here from Madrid. Idoia is the director and founder of the IE Public Tech Lab in Madrid. And well, these are two amazing programs. I'm going to have a few questions here just to get a conversation started, and then we can listen to some of the questions that the audience might have. So, well, first of all, Idoia, I'm going to make the same question for you too, but please, Idoia, tell us a little bit more about yourself and how the program that you lead, you know, was created. Where did the idea come from? You know, what was its, you know, its original focus? What's the problem you were trying to address when you devised the Public Tech Lab?
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a real pleasure. We had I think a conversation like a week or 2 weeks ago, and it was amazing. I was like, wow, what these people is doing in Sao Paulo is amazing. And of course, thank you so much for having the opportunity this space with Alexander, that, as you said, when we started working on this and doing some research on GovTech, he was, I mean, what they were doing in the Scottish government was kind of their thing, right, to follow. So it's great to have the opportunity of spending this time with him as well. So to give a little bit of context, so the Public Tech Lab is part of the AI University, that it's a private university in Spain. It's very international. It's a great space to create the Public Tech Lab, I guess, because we are located in the School of Global and Public Affairs, so it's a government school, but the university is a very entrepreneurial university. So actually it's very well known because of the MBA and very focused on entrepreneurship and innovation. So it's a great space and location. When I started thinking about GovTech, actually I would say that the origins of all this was at MIT, actually at the university. I did my MBA in 2017 after a focus on a career on government and international relations. So I went to MIT not to go to the private sector, but to understand how digitalization, transformation, startups, and all that could impact in the public sector, right? And it was in 2017 that it was a year, Alexander, I don't know how feel about this, but it was a great to see how the UK government was working on this, and they created their fund on GovTech. There was this accelerator program in the UK on report. So it was with these ideas and research, I decided to come back to Spain to create an accelerator program, GovTech accelerator program. Why? Because I was not part of the government. So I saw some models such as public, as I said, in the UK, and actually Brazil Lab that you have there as well, that they are great, and try to replicate that business model in Spain. It was impossible because in Spain, no one knew about GovTech. So before of that, I had the opportunity to sell this crazy idea to the university, and they bought it with a small budget, but they can either something related to GovTech. So we pivot the idea, and we realized that it was important if the market was not there. The first thing that we had to do is start creating demand. So demand from governments for this kind of solutions, startups and scale-up solutions. So from the university, we saw that we had an opportunity to start working with governments with open innovation programs to help them to identify different solutions, different providers for their pain points, experiment them, and inform their tendering processes with that information, that process, right? So we end up creating a lab pretty much focused on helping governments to understand what is open innovation, to understand this new market, and to help them to create their own GovTech labs, I would say. And yes, that's the work that we do now. I would say something more, that what we realized, that being a university, we had a great opportunity to work on training as well. So our open innovation programs have a great amount of training because we are a university, so that makes sense, and because we realized that it was something that it was needed if you want that these kind of programs to be sustainable.
Thank you, Idoia. Yeah, it was amazing. Now, Alexander, tell us a little bit more about yourself and how CivTech program came up.
Sure, thank you, João, and always lovely to hear from Idoia, and thank you all very much for tuning in for this international session. So the journey, my background was I used to run my own digital agency in London for many years, and so my background is digital. To then move back up to Scotland around 7 years ago, I was getting married up here, and found myself randomly as a contractor within the Scottish government, running some tech procurements. And that was an enlightening experience as to how governments run procurements. And then an opportunity came up about a year later, in the summer of 2015, when my director was looking at our engagement with tech and academia and saying, well, why don't we see what else we can do as a public sector with tech and academia, particularly in Edinburgh on our doorstep. And I went to speak with various investors, startups, scale-ups, incubators, just to understand about their relationship with government. And it was clear that there was a real problem at that stage, going back 6.5 years ago, that there was a real problem with how governments engaged with this whole startup landscape. And so we really set out to solve 3 problems. And these problems were, firstly, that in a world where technology moves so quickly, how do you procure what you don't know exists? And secondly, how can you leverage that purchasing power of the public purse to deliver, on one hand, better public services, but also economic development opportunities? And can you procure better to get a better outcome, but do it in such a way that it supports innovative and exportable technologies? And then thirdly, that how can you create the capacity and the capability and the culture to move public servants from a place of risk aversion to risk receptiveness? So to Idoia's point about training, you've got to create the market, inform people what it is, and then train them up to help sustain very much new ways of thinking. So that was our journey in sort of around the autumn of 2015 to 2016, and getting CivTech up on the ground, took 146 meetings within the Scottish government and externally. So, it was very much a journey. And since then, we've run 47 challenges across 5 cycles, and have a number of case studies, which I can talk about shortly. But that was the genesis, and to say that it was really a triangulation of effort between myself, pretty much driving this forward within government, having a very good sponsor in the form of my director, but also teaming up with current program director Mark Elliott, who I knew for years back, considerable experience in cluster development and accelerators. So a real triangulation of knowledge, and that's key when we look at what makes these programs successful.
Well, thank you very much for both of you. And I see this is something very interesting that I actually learned when engaging with programs which have a similar focus but on different contexts, is that we tend to think that the problems that we face in Brazil, or I believe elsewhere, are very unique in terms of we complain about the legal complexity and the regulatory issues and so on. But when we engage with officials from other countries, we actually see that these are shared challenges. Usually, you hear the same complaints, and you tend to have the same bottlenecks when engaging and implementing the programs. So I would like to hear more about Idoia. How was your problem statement, and how you devised your program in order to solve it? What's your theory of change in
Okay, the first thing that I want to say is that this is going to sound like very strategic thinking or everything, and nothing at all. I mean, it has been we have been trying different things and creating our theory of change by walking. I mean, I don't know if you, andando se hace el camino, no? It's a Spanish way to say. So, but yes, now I could say that, I would say that the main challenge that we saw, it was that there was too much innovation in the market that was too far away from governments. And we saw that had a real consequence, that it was creating an even greater gap in the access of quality public service delivery and all that. So, so we thought about how could we change the system being a university, because as Alexander said, if you want to change this, I'm sorry, but you have to do it from inside. And I can help you from outside, and I can create incentives, but you have to do it from your own system, right? So what we saw is that we had the capability to at least, so I couldn't start doing lobbying for changing procurement laws. That was, I mean, of course I do it every day, but it can be like a real goal, like changing that from a university. So what we decided, I mean, the theory of change that we did or developed over the years was like, okay, if you bring these guys together, you're going to create great incentives, so people from inside are going to change the system. So, and we have proved this theory. So what I mean with this is that we work with teams from the government in a specific challenges. We have seen this. I mean, those people identifying different startups, working with them together and piloting these processes, seeing the value that these guys can create, this kind of new non-traditional providers to governments can change, make them incentives to, for instance, design different tendering processes. Not changing the law. What I mean is that even with the same law, you use the law to open the market to new providers. They usually, when you are and I guess that many of the people that is listening to me know what I'm talking about. I mean, when you are a procurement team, you have a lot of work. You don't have time. You don't have incentives. I mean, to make a small contracts, super specific technicality. I mean, you don't do that. But if you are a team that have you been working and trying and piloting different with these kind of people, you are much more incentivized to create a tendering process that, of course, cannot be given to that specific startup because that's not legal. But at least it's not closing that opportunity for that kind of startups and providers. And I think that these kind of things are the things that change the difference. So our our theory of change is making these guys work together, not for big programs, just to try things. And afterwards, the incentives are gonna change. So people from the government are gonna start buying in a different way, not changing the law. I mean, that's the theory that we do.
If I can come in and back that point up, it's very, changing laws is pretty difficult. Changing rules is a little easier. And what was really key, and to your point, Joe, about these are shared problems and bottlenecks, whether you're in Sao Paulo, Madrid, or Edinburgh, that there are laws, there are rules, and there's guidance. And the laws are actually probably quite flexible. The rules we put around them make it inflexible, and the guidance bears no resemblance to the law. And that's certainly what we find. So when you're embarking on these programs, it's really about getting to the nitty-gritty of what the law actually says. So for instance, was there a law that required companies to work with government who had 2 to 3 years worth of accounts? No, there wasn't a law, it was a rule. Well, that can be changed. Was there a law that said IP must reside with government? No, the law said appropriate IP provisions need to be made. And so when you get into, and Warren Smith at GDS, Government Digital Service in the UK, has this great expression, which is difficult to interpret it on the screen, but it's folk, law or folk law, LAW or LORE. And it's great, to sum up what people's assumptions are about what you can and can't do.
Sorry, absolutely. And actually, sorry, but actually what we do always, and we learned by doing this, is that we always go when we have a new client with our lawyer, the expert on procurement, to tell them about, I mean, you can do whatever you want and you can apply your rule if you want, but the law is this one, so you can do it if you want. So it's and that helps a lot of times. Sometimes not, doesn't, but at least we have seen that it's a way to move things forward.
So this was actually pretty amazing to hear from you, because during the morning we had this a more legal discussion on, you know, the legal boundaries on innovation and how to work within a specific legal framework. And what you're saying right now resonates a lot from the conclusions with the conclusions that we had in the morning. You know, in the sense that people sometimes tend to expect that a new law is going to solve something, but indeed it's not a magical solution. You know, it's only going to create a specific framework in which within you can operate and develop your program and so on. So it's been amazing to hear it from you as well. It seems it's a very similar conclusion. And well, I also would like to ask a further question for both of you, and this one is very open. What was a major learning that you had during the implementation of the program?
I go first, or you go, Alexander?
Sure, no, absolutely. Go further, Joy.
Well, major learnings, a lot of them, small, big, and all kind. I'm gonna say 3 broad learnings, and nothing one to another, nothing to do with them, right? But I think that those, at least for me, are very important. The first one is that something that it was surprising to me was like seeing how the relation between provider and public client change when the provider is a startup and a scale up. Because what we have seen, at least in Spain, is that public sector is used to manage contracts, right? They have a contract with a big company, and basically what they do is to see if they are like complying with the contract. I mean, you can't do that with a startup scale up, even in those situations that you are like piloting something that it's a software already done, or you are integrating something, but they need data, they need information about different departments. You have to be like working with them to sell this idea, this new idea in the institution, so they can have the data and information to make the pilot. So it's something that suddenly everything is super transversal, and the teams that we have been working with, they love it because they feel much more engaged and empowered and doing like things that really matter than managing a contract. That's for me the first, like, well, something that for me was very important to know. The second thing that I have seen, and I'm saying this from a private sector institution, is that if you want to have a GovTech lab, you have to have it. It can be outsourced, because it's so, I mean, you are changing and moving so many things inside the institution that it's impossible to have someone to do for you with a 3 years contract. I can help you. I can be with you the first, second year, so you make the team, we make together the strategy, whatever thing, yes. But you have to build a team, and that team has to be from your institution. And I really think that this is a thing that has to be like super clear, because I'm seeing now with we're having a lot of conversations for the European funds, recovery funds, and all these things. And I mean, and I see that there is a lot of appetite for GovTech labs, and it's great. But I mean, but you have to be sure that you want to invest on this, and that you have to do it and be engaged as an institution. This is not something that you can outsource. And the third thing, I started with this idea, and Alexander has said the same. I mean, you have to train your people. This is not, I mean, and sometimes it's a little bit frustrating for us, because when we explain our project, Open Innovation, it seems that it's an open innovation program as the one that you can see in the private sector, or a lot of accelerator programs do it. I mean, doing open innovation program with the public sector is hard, and it's very specific. And even though the smallest steps in the paper are the same of other open innovation programs in the private sector, for instance, oh my God, you have many things that are completely, and you have to be there. And so knowing how to do this and be trained and have the capacities and skills to do it is super important for the sustainability. Because if you don't spend time and resources on training your people to do this way to work, I mean, you are gonna do a super nice and super happy program, but I mean, you are not gonna get anything else. So those are my 3 points, I would say.
Well, sorry, Zhao, you're probably going to direct that to me as well. But you know, I think just picking up on that last point, that's about, you know, how you manage this process, that it can't be outsourced. It has to be done within. And in fact, I recall the conversation I had with my director when I ceased to become a contractor, and having presented the paper of how we could create this system. I said, I'll become a civil servant on one condition, that I do not spend 6 months writing a paper on innovation, but we spend 6 days planning, and we go out the blocks with multiple work streams. Oh, and by the way, 50% of this is going to fail. Are you happy? And he said, yeah, all right. And, you know, so, but you had to do it from the inside. And primarily because you have access, you have access to parts of government by being part of government that you would never be able to have access to as an outsider. So, you know, that change comes from within. The other thing is that, you know, innovation needs to be managed. There's no point giving, because of the different cultures between public sector and particularly startups. So it's more large organization versus small organization. As Adoya was saying about contract management, you know, this is not about value extraction as a conventional procurement and contract would be. This is about value creation. It's a partnership. And particularly when you're dealing with small businesses for whom this might be their first solution. So it's a very different relationship. But as a result of that, you see that buy-in to do things differently. And so what are processes, and Adoya's public tech labs similar as it is with other labs, that, you know, you're dealing with increments of trust. You start small, try it, see where it points, and then you do something bigger, and then bigger. And so our contract values reflect those increments of trust. You know, they get bigger and bigger, but it's managing that innovation process in such a way that it gives the public sector organizations that freedom to experiment within a process that is quite carefully choreographed by people who know how both sides think and work. And so, you know, you can't just let a public sector organization go off and work with a team, give them €500,000 or €1 million and expect something amazing in the outcome. That's not going to work like that. You need to manage that process. Doesn't mean to say you stifle the innovation. On the contrary, what you're doing is enabling it because you know the markers of when something's going to work or not going to work. So it's all kind of it comes down to risk and do interventions there. And I think that, you know, in terms of learnings, is that, you know, GovTech as a concept, as a sector, has predominantly focused on digital. You know, we talk about the digitalization of governments, but actually, as one of our case studies proved, where for CivTech 4 in 2019, we had a challenge around tree seed supply. And of course, if we think back to the autumn and winter of 2019, that's when the climate emergency was really, you know, coming to the fore. And trees and supply of trees was high up on people's agendas. And so the Forestry Land Scotland was an agency that put a challenge forward around how to improve tree seed supply. And we decided to take 5 companies through, but none of these were strictly digital, but they were interesting technologies in this place. Fast forward, or rather rewind to exactly this time last year, everywhere goes into lockdown and you can't plant trees because you're sitting 5 people in the back of a crowded trailer, and therefore your commitments around tree planting goes out the window. But there was one solution, which was called tree tape, which was a biodegradable ribbon where you could put the seedlings in. And rather than planting 60,000 trees in a day, which is the conventional route, in September, after a previous field trial, they planted 1.34 million trees in a day, with a 2,000% increase in productivity. So what this showed was actually you're going beyond digital and it's innovation and delivery of service across the public sector, whatever that service might be. And that's the beauty of these programs. If you manage them well, actually they can be applied to different contexts.
It's been amazing to hear you, Idoia and Alexander. We now have a few questions from the audience. So before reading the questions that we got here, the Q&A chat, I'm going to ask for one of the attendees, João Campanini, to come forward and speak, please. He has raised his hand here. João, please. João, can you hear us? If you can, please, if you can unmute. I'm not sure if you are. Okay, so we're going to take some of the questions here, the Q&A chat, and later we can come back to João. So the first question I got here is Gabriel Romitelli. He's a member of our team, indeed. He was asking about one issue that emerged during the morning discussions. He said, well, we discussed one obstacle to adopt open innovation practices in government, the information asymmetry between supply and demand between private companies and the government. And he was asking about how the national innovation system should encourage and incentivize this connection and exchange between these different peoples and institutions and so on. So if you'd like to comment on that, I'm not sure which of you would like to do so. And how to reduce this asymmetry of information between the private and the public sector.
Well, if I may just come in on that, I mean, the key, I mean, data has been at the core of this in terms of what data the public sector has, in what format, how shareable, and then how do you release it, and then how is that then optimized and utilized and optimized by creators and innovators to draw out conclusions and insights that then means we can redefine how we do public services. So, you know, data has always been at the heart of it. So lots of progress has been made across countries, simply in terms of the standards to which they adhere around public sector data. As an example, in Scotland, we've just set up Research Development Scotland, which is a Research Data Scotland, sorry, which is a kind of a spin out of the government, which is a kind of wholly owned subsidiary, but it's about how you manage and make that data available in a much more wide scale basis. And for instance, health data, you know, we have records of that going back over 50 years. So there's all sorts of conclusions that can be drawn out from that. So yeah, you need to put those systems in places, have standards around data, and then let, you know, entrepreneurs and innovators play with it.
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, that's of course a great answer. Also, I mean, the asymmetry of information between the information that is in the private sector and doesn't reach the public, right? And I feel that there is a culture of, from the public sector, of waiting to everything to happen, in the sense that when you need something, you do a tendering process and you wait for solutions to come. And I think that, I mean, being able actively to create an ecosystem of solutions and providers focus on what you need is something that it's a work that you have to do it every day. I mean, it's not something about a tendering process. So what I feel is that you need a more active approach from governments to be in those innovative spaces, innovative forums, those spaces where you see that, I mean, something that it was super interesting to me to see from the beginning in Spain is that if you, I mean, I went to the South Summit the first year, that it's kind of the big innovation from the private sector, and you couldn't see anyone from the public. I mean, of course, politicians, right? I mean, politicians saying that so important is innovation and to invest in innovation and all that. But there was a competition on education, edtech. No one from the Ministry of Education, no one. And it's kind of, okay, I mean, you have to be more active. And I think that it's something that has to be changed as well, because there is a lot of mismatch of information as well from private to public, and it has to be changed, I guess.
Thank you very much. I have one more question here from Plinio Bernardi Jr. He's asking, what were the biggest challenges that you faced, and what was the moment in which you could say, okay, now the program is going by itself, it's running? Has this moment arrived yet? I guess this is from me.
Idoia, do you want to go first?
Sure. No, no yet. I mean, I don't know. I mean, well, we have a challenge besides that this is it's a challenging space to work. We are a B2G program. I mean, our clients are public institutions. So for us, we have, the challenge of the methodology and try to think and everything. And the second challenge is to be a sustainable program in a university trying to make innovation in public sector. That's kind of a complicated thing, right? So I don't feel that we are in that situation that you see that everything is smooth and you are going and everything is for sure. No, I don't see that. But I can see now that we have a lot of use cases. We have gone through all the stages of these kind of programs and several times, so we can have the comparison. I mean, we've been doing this for 2 years and 3 years, almost 3 years, but it means like 2 years, like making this real happening. So now we know about all the stages, and I think that we know all the challenges. Having said that, in every program we feel that we are short of something, and I guess that I don't know if in several years we're gonna feel in a different way, but so far is that the situation. I know, Alexander, maybe you can tell us that yes, you get in a moment, you get the point that everything is super easy.
If only. I mean, I think that you're always pushing boundaries, and so whether it's moving out from digital to non-digital, or whether it's an idea we had this year for our demo week was to align the challenges with the science, technology, engineering, arts and maths curriculum and make it appeal to young people. And that was 50 hours of unscheduled work after an idea I had 3.5 weeks before our demo week. But we've had now kind of 3,500 live views of those sessions. And so you're always pushing boundaries as to what you can do. Will we ever be self-sustainable? Well, that it all depends where your funding comes from and your models. And there was interesting, I think one of the next questions is around taking IP and in companies, and whether that's a route forward. When we set out at the start, we adamantly said we wouldn't. We wanted our companies keep their IP and their equity, because that would bring more companies into the fold, and therefore better chances of success. So, sustainable, I think it's just that, I think what you can see is that other public sector organizations might take the lead and take it upon themselves to have innovation directors and people really looking about how they deliver services and always thinking, right, okay, what's the new thing coming around that we should be aware of? So, yes, there might become a point where it's sustainable, but I think, there will still be a reliance on government, because that is your, one half of your stakeholdership. And so that's always key to have that relationship. Not least because you again come back to that access piece. So and I think the other thing to say is that when you're pushing boundaries and we're facing all these same challenges, but you're transcending them. You go from, how things are doing at program level to how things are doing at regional level to how things are doing at national level, to then, getting to what's happening globally and how do you all combine best practice globally, which is why we set up CivTech Alliance, was to have that support network. Because as Doya said, doing this stuff is hard. Changing government is not many people wake up thinking, I'd like to try and change government today. Or at least they probably do. And then they hit the walls of government and realize actually it's quite a tricky thing to do. So, I think, are we sustainable? Will we ever be sustainable? Not if you're relying on government, because you need that symbiotic relationship. But, are there different business models? Yes, there are.
And sorry, I would say as well that it's true that my feeling is that everything is to be done, right? And that's part of the challenge. Because actually, we were talking about the other day, right? I mean, we are piloting with contratos menores, minor contracts, right? And we are controlling that now. Now we want to have bigger pilots. So now we are trying to take the latest subvenciones, how do you say, grant law, so we can do something with that, or contrato marco. So it's kind of going big. Afterwards, we are now thinking about how we create a fund for pilots. So it's kind of, since everything is to be done, and this is not easy. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't have the feeling that finally I'm here. I'm in this moment. And
absolutely,
I would say that, and that's amazing as well. I mean, and I always say, I mean, that it's in the thing that we are working in is that we are creating all the time new things, and that's a problem also because I don't know if you have that problem, Alexander, with the teams. I mean, I can't hire anyone in the market that knows what I need.
So you were muted a few seconds ago.
Sorry. So what I was saying is that another problem that you have to make this big or whatever is that there is no people that knows about GovTech in the market to hire directly, right? So you have to invest a lot on the people that you are hiring. And when I say it's a lot, it's at least 6 months, so they know how to do things and to be. So that's another issue. I mean, it's maybe not with it's not a challenge within, it's without, but well, whatever, outside. But that's a thing also that I feel like a big challenge in this. When you are creating new things all the time, there are a lot of challenges and limitations.
I mean, just coming back, but the creating things all the time is that, there's you're going through this process, and what are you creating? You're creating products, to solve challenges. You're creating new processes. You're creating cultural change, and some of that will wither and die unless you sustain that. And the point that often we see is that the innovations don't quite reach their tipping point of widespread adoption within an organization, because either there's been a change of relationship or some factors have changed. And so again, but you need to keep plugging at it and provide that support in order to prove the case study for one example within an organization, to then make it happen again and again within that organization. And the exact example I'm thinking of is we worked with one of the organizations, Nature Scott, which is responsible for a lot of the outside environment and care of the land. And they worked with us on our CivTech 3 program, so it's in 2018. And as a result of going through that process, they then had the confidence to apply to the UK GovTech Catalyst and work on a challenge there. And that budget there is 1.2 million, so considerably larger than the budgets we work with. But they had the confidence to do that. So there are good stories from this where you see people starting small, trying it, then going larger. And that's it, as Adoya is saying, with these programs, you're always learning. And because of the mindset and skill set and heart set of the people probably involved in these programs, you're always, you're never finished. There's always more to do and push the boundaries. And that's that's the other thing, is interesting, that kind of the makeup of who are in these teams. You know, they're not people who rest. It's and Zhao, you know, you'll be the same. You know, you're not content with what IdeiaGov's doing because there's more to be done. And right now you've learned that. Let's build on that. And that bit hasn't worked. Okay, fine, we'll bin that and we'll crack on. You know, so there's always so much to do, primarily because there is that natural tension of government being stable and secure versus, you know, private sector, which is slightly risk taking, and there will always be that tension. And it's that tension that is where we come in to manage.
Oh, these last pieces have been really amazing, and I'm going to you have been approaching this issue when you talk about how to make this, how to keep pushing forward, how to keep making these initiatives innovative in the end, and how to make it sustainable, you know, through the years. And two questions have emerged here which relate a lot with this, but from a perspective of the public official, which is, how do you approach stakeholders which are more resistant to innovation? You know, how do you convince these people to embark with you? And I'm relating a lot to what you're saying, because I have the same feeling here. And this is a constant challenge. It's part of what we're describing right now, indeed, Alexander. You know, this permanent tension, because, you know, you want to make innovation as radical as you can, but at the same point, you must you understand that within government, you you're required to navigate through these command chains in order to make things happen. And how do you do so? How do you engage the stakeholders? How do you convince them? How to bring them to your side?
So if I'll say that, I mean, you know, what is government there for? You know, we're here to serve the citizens, and it's now critical. In fact, you know, look at the development of any service, the user is absolutely the heart of it. So it no longer is about what does the organization want, but it's about what the citizen needs. And so if your processes are set up in terms of user research and citizen-centric design, then that argument around changing the way things should be done becomes much easier, because it's no longer you're saying, well, I want this because this is my organization. It's actually, yes, but your end users require something different. And it's about presenting that. Then, of course, you have priorities for government. So, you know, if you're an innovation program and your government's priority is around, say, might be housing or green, you know, the transition to net zero, then it makes sense to focus your program in those areas, because there are people who do want to change things, and that they see this as a mechanism of being able to deliver on those outcomes. And I think it's you know, you're moving from outputs to outcomes, and you know, it's about finding the people who are receptive to that. So you find in the early days, you know, you're taking quick wins, you're taking the low hanging fruit, and working with people who want to work with you to then build up that reputation, to then say, well, actually, this is going to happen. So work with us, you know, or, you know, you won't see necessarily, you won't say this, but you know, they won't benefit, perhaps should we say, from being engaged right at the start, as if they had been. So, yeah, so.
Yes, I mean, just to complement, I sometimes think that it's better not to waste time with people that you're never gonna change. And sometimes you can do that because it's you depend on this guy that doesn't want to move the ball, and you want this program to be a reality and everything, so you have to do it. But to be honest, what I have seen in my experience is that when it comes to innovation and do new things and complicated things, you have to have really good incentives to go in. So I would say try to to identify those first mover and go for them, and don't waste them to the others. And when you don't have any other, I mean, and you, if that's not the case and you have to do something and convince to someone, I mean, of course, make it easy for him or for her, in the sense that political priorities, and try to create those incentives, regulations, and don't come to this guy or this woman with something super complicated. She's not gonna buy it. So be strategic, super. And again, always 3 dimensions: money, political will, and regulation. Something easy in those 3 dimensions, and go for it. But yeah.
No, I was just gonna pick up on that point of yeah, work with those who are are receptive to work with, and yeah, and because I say that there will be folks that it just would be too much effort. But to Adoya's point, absolutely, about making it easy for folks. In our process, we manage the procurement and the legals of all the contracting. In other words, we say, we will take care of that. You don't need to worry about that, because Scottish Government has taken care of that process. So this is far easier, and you are allowed to do it. So when you're doing stuff for new, as again, yeah, that's right, make it easy for people. And the more barriers you can remove as to why someone would want to get involved, the quicker you'll get people onboarded.
Well, Alexander, Idoia, thank you very, very much. I was really enjoying this conversation. For me, we could spend another hour here, but our staff is warning me that we are actually out of time. And if I don't stop here, they're going to hunt me down. So I believe that this is the time for us to stop. So once again, thank you very much. It's been amazing to hear from you. I understand you have a lot to learn from each other, and I really want to get more engaged with you. Thank you very much for all this exchange we have been having over the last weeks and months, to both of you. And well, this is not our last interaction for sure. We're going to have more meetings like that. So, as we say here in Brazil, muito obrigado e até a próxima. Abraço.
Muito obrigado. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you so much. And if I say one final point, João, think what we can do together. And you transcend just from individual program to looking at stuff globally. And if you have a collective capability, then that acts as a huge powerhouse to solve some of the world's challenges. And that's what CivTech Alliance and this group is about. So watch this space for what's coming very, very soon. Some really exciting stuff. But thank you all so much for the opportunity to share some of the knowledge. As ever, great to discuss these challenges with Idoia and João. All of us are going on this tough journey of transforming government. But thank you for this opportunity to share some of that experiences.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao.
Bye. Ciao.